We oftentimes get a lot of questions about players wanting to know what their options are in PvP. If you're newer to the game, the answer is probably you don't have a lot of options, but what I'm hoping to accomplish in this video is give you directions for where you can look to upgrade, kind of a plan for what to look forward to in the future. It will take a couple months, but you can put together a decent PvP team in a couple months, and I'll talk about upcoming costumes to look out for, and what the current meta is on attack. I definitely cover a lot of topics here, so if you want to skip around, go for it, but if not, then buckle up, enjoy the ride, and let's talk some PvP. To help you get an idea of what options you have for turn 1, I've put together this slide of all the 0 to 3 SP costumes that I think are relevant. These should form the foundation of your attack team for the costumes that you use. These consist of, a combination of dispellers, buffers, DPS, utility, and tanks. You might have some extra units left over that you can use either as additional tanks or for sniper attacks that I'll talk about later, but these are the main costumes. I've listed also ones that need either potentials or a certain dupe level to reach the minimum SP, which is basically required in PvP. SP is very important, so most of the time it's +3, but if it's +1 for some of the newer costumes, they change it to be +1 instead to make it easier for players. Like with Roxy, I've labeled them as well here. Beyond this, your team hopefully should have synergy. That is, your buffers should buff your units, ideally all of your units in useful ways. And sometimes I see some costume or some team comps that I kind of want to put a question mark because I don't think their buffers are helping all of their units in an ideal way. So some simple examples of that. If you're running Red Riding Hood Rou, I don't think you should be running a Justia costume afterwards or an Alec costume afterwards. And on the flip side, if you're running H Lathel, right? H Lathel gives a huge buff to physical units. He's the ideal buffer. He is useless though for magic, right? So I don't think you should be running H Lathel and then some kind of magic based costume. Now there might be a niche case with Pool Party Schera because she has Dispel, but in general, try to make sure that your units are having synergy, that your buffers are buffing other units on your team, and not just like one or two, but ideally all of them. So when assembling your attack, you need to be considering the kind of 3 main defense archetypes. That is Idol Gran, Void Gran, and like standard defenses. We'll talk about Idol Gran first because she's the first costume that came out that really changed the meta. So Idol Gran has a preemptive skill. She's the first preemptive skill in the game. So before the fight even starts, she gets to cast her ability, Taunt, and give herself a huge energy card. And she basically says, hey, attack, deal with this, right? And if you're climbing and you're a newer player, you're going to run into this in Platinum and Diamond and Masters, and it's going to surprise you, catch you off guard. You need to find ways to deal with it. I've put together some standard builds, both for Gran, for defense focused and mres focused builds for her Idol Gran costume. And I put together some examples of units. I'm not going to go through every single unit, but I want to go through just what the math looks like on can your unit deal with, can they dispel, can they kill Idol Gran on turn 1. And so I've put together here, this is a standard Gran build. I put her at BAS. This is kind of a pretty solid one with the refinement levels, but you may find a little bit of variation, but kind of max HP is going to be right around 28k, 28.7k, something like that. So with her 70k HP energy card, she's going to be having about 98 k HP total. You can expect in the high 90s. And so we're going to be looking at different units and see how they match up against that. The first one, I'm going to go through actually how you set it up with the buffers and Zenith as well. So we're going to look at Elenier. Elenier is the ideal unit against Idol Gran because she has both Dispel and she has Elemental Advantage. So these are my Elenier's stats. I prefer Piercing Magic Bow. I won't go too much into why, but right now we can see the total damage she's going to deal. If Gran has 0 res, it's going to be more than enough. She's going to deal like 60k. The first one's going to be dispelling though, so it's going to be like something like 40k, but it's going to be more than enough. If we add a 90 res here, she's now dealing doo-doo damage. It's not even going to become close, right? So we need a buffer. If we add in H Lathel, right, we can see it's still not going to be enough because with 90 def, she doesn't have any kind of def down or anything, so she's not going to deal enough. She's going to be dealing something like oh, sorry, I forgot the elemental advantage. She's going to be dealing something like 22k, but that first hit's going to be dispelled. So she's actually going to be doing about 2/3 of this, which is not going to be anywhere near the 28k that she's going to have after you dispel that first attack. And so what you need to do, usually, what most people do is they add in Zenith, right? Zenith is one of the most broken characters on attack. And I'll show you how to add, for Zenith, you need to add the chains here, because Zenith's going to give you 6 chains. And then she's also going to give you vulnerability. So if you have her, I have my Zenith fully potentialed, but she's not fully +5, she's +4. So the total vulnerability comes out to 93%. And this becomes a 0.93 multiplier, or we get 1.93 in total. So now we can see here the total damage that Elena is going to be dealing. Now these numbers are a little weird. This is 13.39 physical damage, not including the chains, but including the vulnerability. And so I'll show you how this number actually totals up to here with these 3 down here. This is 13,390 with 1.6, which is the 6th chain, and then this is 13,390 with the 7 chain, which is after this first hit, and then this is with 8 chain after the other 2 hits as well. And so these 3 numbers total that 68k total, which is why this 13 may be a little confusing. But this one again is going to be used to dispel the shield, so this isn't going to be hitting, but these 2 will. And so with my high crit rate, pretty well built linear with Zenith and an H-Lethal buff, this is going to like perfect stats all around. She can absolutely obliterate an Idol Gran. That's kind of what you should take away from this. And Elenier actually is one of the few units that might be able to get away with running just a Sammy, right? You may just be able to run the 0 SP Sammy, like I mentioned in that first slide, where this is going to be 40k total, but again, the first hit, that first like 12k or something like that, is not going to be used to dispel the shield. So you're actually going to be very, very close to that defense Idol Gran of 28k threshold. I don't know the exact numbers, but running a Sammy and Zenith opener is going to be very close and will kill a lot of Idol Grans, maybe not every single one of them. So that's how I would treat Elenier. Justia actually can deal with Idol Gran as well if you run an H-Lethal buff and you have a fully upgraded like Kendo Club. Kendo Club, to add in Zenith, you'd run the 6 chains, but the damage multiplier, the vulnerability doesn't apply for fixed damage units, so she doesn't benefit from that at all, which is why using Zenith with Justia usually feels a little bad, because you don't get that bonus damage. But she's actually going to be dealing more than enough. I say more than enough. This is going to be 96k total, right? With those 3 hits, because that's after the 6 chain. And you might say, well, doesn't she have more like 28 plus the 70 is more like 98? And I would say yes, but when you also add in Zenith hitting 6 times before, Zenith with some decent gear is going to be dealing at least 2k, and so she'll make that difference up. And so I'd even say, you could, if you wanted to, run a perfectly built H-Lethal, a well-built Justia with the Kendo, and running a Zenith, right? And you don't even need to do her vulnerability upgrades because they don't affect fixed damage units if you didn't want to, right? But that being said, most people don't use this, but this is how you would do the math, right? Another unit that can kill Idol Gran is Alec. It's basically the same thing as Justia. He has almost the same build, right? Again, just throwing some stats around here. If we did, we could do SBB or BBS, right? We can see here, no advantage, 6 chain, etc. with that buff. He is going to absolutely obliterate Idol Gran. He's going to deal like 130k. And the nice thing is, when you see 130k, that means maybe I don't need this damage upgrade. This is still more than enough. Or maybe I do the damage upgrade, but I only need +3. That's also still more than enough, right? And so while a unit like Kendo, if you wanted to use it to kill Idol Gran, you need her to be almost fully, like perfectly built, and even then it's going to be close. Alec is so far above that damage threshold, he doesn't need perfect substats, or he doesn't need perfect like stats on every single thing. So maybe you can get away without a damage upgrade. Maybe you don't need his UR, right? Even this is probably going to kill most Grans. So you can be a little more flexible with the Alec opener against Idol Gran, right? So those are kind of physical options. I'm going to go through a couple options for magic. So again, this is typical magic build or mres build for Gran. Again, we're going now 110 mres ideally because we need to deal with a base bunny eclipse. So she'll look something like this. 26k HP now. And let's say we got attacked by a Schera, right? So Schera, I'm just going to BBS all the way across. You obviously can get better than that if you want. And a perfect BHelena, so fully upgraded 115, and then the 50 crit rate. So we now have almost 100% crit rate. And I don't know her exact, I think Pool Party is her best here, but it's close enough, right? So here we can see she's dealing, if we add in a Zenith, right? We add in a Zenith, like a perfectly built Zenith, she's going to deal way more than enough damage. Again, remember the first attack, this is actually going to be like 80% of this because the first hit is going to dispel and then the other 4 hit afterwards. But that's going to be way more than the 26k HP left over after the dispel. So this is more than enough to kill. You could run the same thing, but with Lapis Witch. So 63k, again, a third of that is going to be used to dispel, but the other 2/3 is going to be way more than the 28k. And for most these units, I think should be pretty clear. If you remove the chains and you remove the damage bonus, this is not going to kill an Idol Gran, even if that first damage hit. So yeah, so if we remove the chain and the damage, we say, hey, let's not run the Zenith, we're not going to come anywhere close to killing an Idol Gran. And the same thing with the pool party as well, right? This isn't going to come anywhere close to killing Idol Gran. So the takeaway is for Schera, she needs Zenith and she needs BHelena, but if she has both of those, she's going to kill an Idol Gran very readily, even if she has like perfect resistances. Same thing with Bunny Eclipse. So Bunny Eclipse, Idol Gran was released kind of as the counter to Bunny Eclipse, so it was meant to punish this. With how absolutely broken BHelena's potentials have come out, it actually comes pretty close, but I think it's still pretty safe to say that even with like a perfectly built Zenith, and the fact that Eclipse has elemental advantage, the fact that she doesn't have Dispel means she ultimately can't deal quite enough. She does incredible damage, but she's not going to deal quite enough to kill the Idol Gran. She's going to need that 90, she's going to need like 96k total against a perfect Idol Gran that went, 110 mres, and Bunny Eclipse doesn't quite have that damage there. You might be able to tweak stuff a little bit. I've already given it pretty decent stats, but maybe, I don't know, maybe if you throw this to like a NSS or something, you might be able to get there, but probably not. And then for Void Gran, there's a lot of depth to this unit. This unit is very complicated, but there are 2 general strategies you see in defenses with how they build their Void Gran. The first is getting as much HP as possible. So here you can see a Gran that's basically abandoned defense and magic resist. You're gonna melt to those things, but they have a ton of HP, 31k, and the goal with this is to punish people who are being greedy and trying to run fixed damage, specific costumes. So those 2 would probably be Justia's Gluttony. So her Blood Glutton costume will deal, I think it caps right around 29 point something k, but mine does like 28.3k. This is a really well invested, really well built Justia, and she's dealing like 28k. That's not going to quite be enough to kill the Void Gran at 31k. So Gran's going to murder her in the counter, and you basically lost the attack entirely if Justia is used as her follow-up costume for turn 1. Another costume is Alec, that the HP Void Gran can counter really well. This happens particularly in this kind of positioning where you put some unit here, Alec attacks that one, and he hits him in the AoE at the end of his diagonal if you hide her in the back right corner. In this case, again, Alec does 3 hits, but that first one only deals 25k, not enough to kill her, and he gets murdered in the counter attack. And again, if you lose units on your attack, it's probably a sign you've lost your attack entirely. So that's kind of the main strategy. She's not great against other things. She might kill on like a basic attack or something like that, but she's also very likely to be blown up by units if she has that little of defense and magic resist. The other main strategy is to put a decent amount of defense and magic resist on her. You can't get as much HP. This isn't fully like min-max. I'm sure people have better builds than this, but like generally speaking, this is the kind of build you put together. And the idea here is when people throw basic attacks at their final units, or maybe they put a low damage or a multi-hit ability. Roxy is a great example of that. That does probably not enough damage to kill in 1 hit, and so Gran will murder her on the counter, especially if she crits, but she doesn't even need the crit. This should be more than enough damage. So there are units that try to build defense to deal with this, but you almost always need an energy guard as well. Right, so next I want to talk about some of the major archetypes of attack team comps, so you can see like what the options are out there if you're just starting to form your attack team. Have to start with probably the most popular, which is the H-Lethal and fixed damage comp, or the burst offense comp. This is very much a blitz comp, and go into different strategies with it. So very high in popularity. Some of the pros: this is a guaranteed kill on 2+ units. Your opener is H-Lethal. You probably go into Zenith afterwards. Some people go Zenith after the next costume. Then you go into Elenir and you do Young Alec. Those will take care of Idol Gran. And with Zenith, they can kill any other unit like a Leclis or a high defense Therese or something. And then afterwards, you follow it up with a Blood Glutton Justia, a Stabby Justia. You could even follow it up with Kendo if you wanted, and then Young Alec. So guarantee kill on 2+ units, and you will find very often this team can kill 3, 4, and sometimes I solo the entire team on turn 1, especially if my final unit gets a lucky crit or something. But there are some big cons for this unit. There's 0 defensive prep for turn 2. You are trying to blitz. You are trying to kill 2, ideally 3 units. If you kill 3 units, you're just saying, I win. I have more units on the board. But you're very, very susceptible to those Eclipses nuking your team, right? The Amrubias nuking your team as well, right? There's so many weaknesses. And you also have no Dispel on turn 3, which is a big problem for Elenier focus comps, because you're going to run into Eclipses that are going to have Taunt, that are going to have huge energy guards, and Elenier has a rough time with those on turn 3. There are ways you can get around it. One of the best is to use Young Alec instead. Young Alec has other weaknesses on turn 1 because he's likely to kill himself on a Void Gran, but Elenier on turn 3 is not as good as Young Alec. So this is a pretty solid comp. People can consistently get anywhere, win rates between 80 to 95%. It just depends on who you happen to be playing that day. Then there's the balanced offense comp. This is a pretty general category for anything where you're not running a major like 1 SP buff, and then you usually run some form of Dispel, but beyond that, it's kind of up to you. So oftentimes you'll see Schera, oftentimes you'll see Elenier, but beyond that is a lot of utility units like Rou, like Roxy, like Amrubia that can give themselves evasion, give themselves dodge, give themselves silence the enemies, do a lot of different things like that. You sometimes run a buffer like Samay that's free, and a lot of little chip units. In my opinion, this is like medium popularity. It's not as popular as the nuke, the burst comp we just went over, but the pros are that you usually run 3 damaging costumes, which means you usually can put pressure in all 3 lanes, because it's very common that people will try to like hide 1 lane on defense, and that's where all their squishies are hiding. And so if you can put pressure on 3 lanes with a Schera and then a Rou kick and then an Amrubia, right? Like, that's a lot of pressure you can put on all 3 lanes. It's very likely you're getting 1 or 2 key squishies. So that's kind of the main goal here. Cons is very vulnerable against Void Gran because you don't have any big buffers. It's very likely that these units are going to be dealing kind of chip damage to a Void Gran, which is exactly what she wants. She can just spank them back to hell. So pretty common. It's pretty flexible here. I put a lot of team cons into this category that maybe don't belong there, but kind of a catch-all. Then beyond that, we have 3 different variations on Turtle. So the most common, probably most popular right now, is a BHelena and Schera, and in my opinion, AD Diana always belongs there. If you don't have an AD Diana, that's fine, but it just works so well. So in this comp, you're running BHelena as your 1 SP, and then you have any form of Schera. If you want to run, base Schera can just absolutely clear the left column. PV Schera can go anywhere. It's really up to you. And then you usually want to hide Diana in the corner and have her give the entire team an absolute gigantic 40 to 50k shield, depending on how well you've upgraded it. So one of the big pros, in my opinion, is that Helena has the best turn 3 follow-up of any support. Rou, if you run Riding Hood Rou, which I'll talk about in a second, she doesn't have the best follow-up on turn 3 because you put so much HP into her that her other costumes aren't the best. And Lathel is really lackluster on turn 3. Like his buff it sucks now because it lost some of the attack that he had on turn 1. And then what is he going to do? Like TK Lathel and get a little shield, or maybe deal some damage, but you probably built him tank and he can't kill anything. Like Lathel is kind of a dead unit on turn 3. But Helena is giving her team huge amounts of damage reduction. Like, she is still super useful, along with still providing the best buff in the game for anything not fixed damage, like magic and crit rate. Like, that's absolutely crazy. So one of the other pros is that Diana is almost impossible to dispel turn 2. So unlike Red Riding Hood Rou, which I'll talk about in a second, not BHelena, but AD Diana's energy guard is based on her aura. So you need to dispel actually Diana herself to get rid of that aura. You can't just dispel Schera and suddenly the energy guard's gone. And so it's very, very hard to eat through that energy guard. You usually need some kind of nuke, whether it be Alec or some kind of buffed physical damage character. Gray does really well here because he has elemental advantage against Schera and Roxy, but you need some kind of crazy damage to get through that on turn 2. Otherwise, it's just such a strong turn 2 defense. Cons, it can get stonewalled by wind tanks, and unfortunately most of the tanks are wind, so there are a lot of options for units if they want to build like a 90 mres Eclipse or a 90 mres Zenith or Ulstein. Like, these units can absolutely stonewall Schera. She'll deal half damage to them, and it can be really hard, especially if they're healed. It can be really hard to get around them. And then lastly, Diana is kind of a dead unit every other turn. Her base costume, while it's absolutely OP for PvE, it's very useless for PvP. You honestly don't even want to queue it usually because you have more than enough crit rate already with BHelena, so she's not really doing anything on turn 3. So you basically are saying, hey, my turn 2 is really, really, really good. My turn 4 is not going to be that great, but my turn 1 and turn 2 are really, really good. So that's kind of the purpose of this turtle comp. And then as maybe a more traditional turtle comp that lasts a little bit longer, you have Red Riding Hood Rou plus Flex. So again, this is probably medium popularity. You see it quite often. I'd say pros, so crit rate and edgeguard last till turn 6. So now we're getting that 50% crit rate, same as BHelena, but this lasts for 6 turns, whereas Helena's only lasts for 4. And more importantly, your edgeguard lasts till turn 6. So AD Diana's edgeguard will cap out at around like 40-50k HP for the edgeguard, and Red Riding Hood Rou's is only about 30k, but Red Riding Hood Rou's will last for 6 whole turns, which is really, really nice. And if she dies, it doesn't matter. So this is an incredibly strong thing. It's a little bit easier to eat through, right? Because the edgeguard isn't as high, but it lasts for 6 turns, which is really nice. You still have a strong, defense on turn 4 and turn 6, right? But the cons are that her edgeguard is easier to dispel. You can dispel the unit directly. So if enemy is running a Schera or something, it's going to get rid of that edgeguard right away and make the unit much more vulnerable. And also the edgeguard obviously is not as strong as Diana's, but there's a lot of flexibility with what you can do here. You can run, a Red Riding Hood Rou and then a 1 SP costume, then a 2 SP costume, or you can run 3 1 SP costumes. There's just a lot of variety. This is the chance for a lot of units that are kind of independent, like Queen Sylvia to shine, and kind of utility units like Roxy and Rubia that have, evasion and silence and stuff like that. So there's a lot of variety that you can see here as well. And then lastly, this is the least possible, but I think it still deserves a place here. I think it will be relevant eventually, maybe not today, but Taunt and Flex. So this is where you run a Glacia Taunt for 3 SP, or a Leclis Taunt for 3 SP, or a Seer Taunt for 2 SP, and you just basically bait the enemy and say, hey, did you bring Dispel, right? So pros, this is very strong if the defense lacks Dispel, because they're going to waste their entire turn 2 attacking one unit. If it's Glacia, she's going to resurrect. If it's Eclipse, she's probably never going to die. And if it's Seer, she's probably never going to die, and she's going to be full HP. Unless, of course, they bring a Blood Glut and Justia, in which case she gets one shot, which is why Seer isn't as popular as maybe she could be otherwise. The pro is that it's unpopular. So every time I see this on, why did I lose an attack? And I go back like, oh my God, they had a Glacia opener. I just groan inwardly because I know like I didn't plan for it. There's nothing I could do about it. But the con is that it's easy to counter if it becomes popular or strong, because you just run a Dispel unit, run a Schera on your defense to go first. And as long as she can survive turn 1, you basically have 1 on defense, which is, not too easy. So I think this is something to keep an eye out for. I wouldn't build towards this yet, but I've seen more and more people. I've seen, a couple of people attack me today that had Glacia and Seer openers, which was, it's fun to see. It's variety. It might change how I do my defense, but not super popular. And so again, I think I would consider these like the 5 main archetypes of offenses right now. I think there's enough variety. I would say, definitely the burst opener is the most popular, but try whatever you like. You could find people attack you and beat you with all kinds of different strategies. Most of them have to deal with Dispel. Yeah. All right, so next I wanted to go into some examples of players' dupes that they post in the community server and just give my thoughts on how I approach what my recommendations would be. I hope that if you're newer to this game and you're trying to figure out what you can do, that you can look at these examples and kind of figure out for yourself. Obviously you can ask for opinions, but this will kind of point you hopefully in the right direction. So here's an example of somebody that posted their dupes in the past week or two. They have H-Lathel +5, they have the Stabby Justia +5, they have quite a few decent characters. When I look at this, I see they have enough dupes to have at least 2 different options. So the obvious one is they could run H-Lathel and base Elenier, which they have +5, and they actually have her Idol as well +5. So they have a really strong Elenier, really strong base Lathel, and a strong Justia stab. So I think that, the straightforward comp is H-Lathel, base Elenier, Justia stab, and then 2 other units. Right now, you should work towards Zenith, because Zenith enables base Elenier the most. But if you don't have that, you can always work for, potentially using a 0 SP Sammy if you want to upgrade her potential to help Elenier kill. You can use Gray for a skip basic attack, and you can use a physical tank, ideally, for Lathel, like Gran or Leclis, that might be able to snipe a unit on turn 1. So, in my opinion, the most important thing is, pots for Elenier and getting Zenith +3 and getting her potted as well. That's what I would recommend if you want to do physical. And then obviously for turn 3, I think following up with the Justia swipe ability is also really strong here too. Then your second option, since you have a really good BHelena as well, you can run a turtle comp with BHelena, Code as Schera. I think your AD Diana is pretty cracked too. That's what I'd recommend for 2 different options. And again, it's up to you. It's really hard to invest in 2 different teams of PvP because there's only so many tiers we get. So kind of pick which direction you want to go, and it's up to you. This example is from a very new player they post their dupes. This is very common. We look if all your 5 stars are 0, +1, or +2 dupes, it's too new in the game for you to do PvP competitively. You should enjoy the game. Have a lot of fun. Enjoy pulling for different costumes and getting them +3, +4, +5, etc. But don't worry about PvP. You cannot be competitive. That's just reality. There are SP requirements and certain costumes like Dispel and buffers that you don't have yet. That's okay. If you do want to, what costume should I pick for PvP? Hopefully, I don't know if it's been announced yet. I don't know if they've confirmed it, but I'm hoping that PP Schera, the Pool Party Schera costume, is rerun during the summer event. And Pool Party Schera is one of the best costumes for PvP. It is a 2 SP Dispel that does decent damage. So if you want to start building a magic PvP comp, I would wait until that costume banner comes out and pull that to at least +3, ideally +4, +5. It'll serve you very well in PvP. But until then, don't sweat PvP. And then lastly, this is kind of somebody more in the middle. They have a decent selection of costumes here. They don't have every single thing in the book. So the first thing that stands out is H. Lathel +4, which is solid. You want +5, but +4 is just fine. For their Justia, they have decent dupes on some of them. They have a really good Blood Glutton, which could be good on the opener, but not really great follow-up after that. And so then beyond that, I'm looking for base Elenir or Alec for dealing with Idol Gran, and I'm not seeing either of them here. So what I would say from that is I probably wouldn't go the physical route. What I would consider very strongly is your magic route, because you can see you have +5 PP Schera, you have +3 base, which are 2 great costumes for Schera. You have +5 BHelena, you have +1 AD Diana, you have +1 Roxy. These already are a great foundation for a comp. And so I would probably tend towards a magic focus comp. I would run BHelena, I would run base or PP Schera, depending on what you want. I would consider running AD Diana. AD Diana at +1 is half the value of the shield, so you're going to cap at around 25k, 20k, 25k, which is not as great. I would try it out. It may not be as great as you running some other 1 SP costume, like if you get Rue's Kick to +3, or you want to run Sword Queen Sylvia or something in the meantime. Those might be good interim costumes, but otherwise, if you get more dupes on AD Diana, I would definitely run her. You could even consider Therese if you get her +3. And then lastly, I would slot in Roxy if you run PB Schera. You'll have 1 SP left over, and I would 100% put Roxy in. She's going to do great. She's not going to kill every unit, but she's going to kill squishies, and most importantly, she's going to silence a column. And I think with that, you have a pretty strong PvP comp. I would definitely focus towards magic since you're kind of already there. Before we talk about positioning, we first need to understand what are the most commonly used costumes on defense. And while this isn't a perfect metric, I don't super like this system. It is decent at giving you a chance of at least understanding what's common. So if we go to defense, you can look at Grandmaster or Master. I'd look through this list and just find the most common costumes that you'll face on turn 2 for your offense. What you're going to be up against, and the most common by far is Bunny Eclipse. So you can see here after that it's 3 tank costumes, a buffer in Helena, and then Blood Glutton Justia, White Cat Rue, the Bonk Glacia, and base Schera. So I wouldn't worry too much about all the ones down here. These are all pretty, I wouldn't say rare, but they're far less common. The main thing is, make sure your offense is pretty well defended against Bunny Eclipse. You want it to hopefully hit just 1 unit. Same thing with Justia. If you have space or you have the option, I would make it decent so she only hits 1 unit. White Cat Rue is just a lot harder to dodge because you don't know. She just creates a lot of new opportunities with other combos. So I wouldn't worry too much about comboing, but let's focus specifically on Bunny Eclipse and Blood Glutton Justia. So I'll show you what I run, and this is what a lot of attackers run right now, especially if they're full aggro. So if you run full aggro, you're going to have no defensive abilities. You're relying solely on the tanky unit's tankiness. And so what's most common, I think, is some kind of a box offense like this. That's what a lot of us have kind of fallen on. In this case, the very common formula, as I mentioned in my archetypes, is it's going to be your Lathel, a Dispeller, a Nuker, Zenith for bonus damage, and then some kind of tank, whether that, whatever tank you like. So the reason we like this offense is because if these backline units have enough mres, they can survive Bunny Eclipse and completely negate her effectiveness with her ability. So my Lathel has 110 mres and my Zenith has 90, and so as long as the Bunny Eclipse isn't buffed, then if she doesn't crit too much, then she can survive. And so basically this is pretty strong against Bunny Eclipse. Now if she goes down the middle, obviously she's going to obliterate my Elenir, so you can't win in every single column, but winning in 2 out of 3 columns is probably a good deal. And similarly with Blood Glut and Justia, which does about 11k when it's unbuffed. If it goes down the left or right column, yeah, left column, sure, I lose my Justia. Right column, I don't lose my Leclis. And then coming down the middle, these two tanks will survive, but I'll lose my Eleanor. So that's pretty much as good as you can do against those two costumes. Obviously, if you run into Rou, like I might run into problems with Rou if they start kicking down the middle or down the sides, there may be problems. But against those two costumes, that's pretty much as good as you can get. There's a couple other options. You can always do some other anti-eclipse. So in this case, she only hits one unit in the left and right columns. You can switch these two around, so she only hits one unit in the left and right column, or left and middle columns. And then you can of course mirror these. So you have quite a few different options. Again, she only hits one in the middle and right columns here. So you can kind of play around with this. The reason why you probably wouldn't want this one is because although it's not common, if people run Alec is gonna come down the right lane and just obliterate your entire back three rows here. So that's what I would suggest if you're running a full aggro team, is maybe try the box formation or try an anti-eclipse. I'd start there. If you have something like Red Riding Hood Rou, things get a little more complicated. Let me put in my girl Rou. Where is she? So if this is your buffer, like, oh, I'm running Red Riding Hood Rou, and again, you wouldn't run Justia, but maybe you run Eleanor, maybe you run Sword Queen Sylvia or whatever. Things are a little different now because you still want to account for a Bunny Eclipse, but now you're also a little bit scared of Schera. You want to make sure that Schera doesn't hit more than one unit, ideally, with any of her abilities, because the weakness of Red Riding Hood Rou is Dispel, whereas AD Diana has a stronger edge guard and higher HP. It doesn't last as long, but it's much harder to dispel, whereas Red Riding Hood Rou, any of these units, their edgeguard can be dispelled. And so what I would do is, instead of running like this, where it's very weak to PP Schera in the middle, although it's not popular, I might consider running like this instead, so that even, if Blood Glut and Justia runs down the middle, this Eleanor is going to die anyway because she's dark. But at least this way, if they happen to run PP Schera or Code S or something that was less popular, it's not going to hit more than one unit and make multiple units lose their dispel. So if you're running Red Riding Hood Rou, I would try something like this. There's some other permutations you can do. Like this is a little scary, right? Again, like Pool Party Schera is going to hit a bunch of different units, so you might try something like this. This is decent as well. Again, you just imagine a Schera going down each column. You can see here, if she goes down the right column, then she's dispelling 2 units. So just something to think about. Schera is more of a threat against Red Riding Hood Rou. And then if you're running like the full Magic Turtle, like you're running BHelena instead, let's switch in a couple of these units so we have a better sense of who's going where. It's good enough. So if you're running AD Diana as your edge guard for a Super Turtle comp like this, you would put this here. Then you can be a lot more greedy. The most common, I'd say, is the 401, and in this case you either run Pool Party Schera. If you run Pool Party Schera, then you have a 1 SP damage costume here like Roxy or Roo Kick or Sword Queen Sylvia. If you're running the base Schera, you're just trying to clear out that column, and then you have an auto attack along with Eclipse, something like this. You probably put the buffer in front, but in this case you usually put your Diana in a place where it's almost impossible to dispel her. Like even if Eclipse goes down here with this column, she's probably not going to be able to break that shield unless it's like super buffed. So this is pretty safe, and usually we put it here so that Schera in the left column, her abilities cannot reach the AD Diana. So usually you put her in the back. But if you find this doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can try, there are other options. You can always try something like this, right? So that she can give all of the units, you'd probably move her here, right? This still allows AD Diana to hit all of the units. Maybe you put Schera in the back. I don't know. It depends on what works for you. But you might try something like this as well. But those are kind of your options. If you're not running AD Diana with the huge edge guard, I in general would not recommend a 401. I see people doing it occasionally, but it's just too risky given how absolutely popular Bunny Eclipse is. You just don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because again, on attack, you want to be having at least 80%, usually somewhere between 80 and 95% attack win rate. So I wouldn't try this unless you're doing that. And if you're doing a full tank, like if you're not doing this and you're doing, I know some people have started trying doing like duo tanks or something. Seer has a 2 SP. Where's Seer? I don't know where she is. But if you're running full tanks, I have no clue. I haven't seen it too much. Once it gets more popular, I'll have a better idea. But for now, you're kind of on your own with how you want to position. Okay, and finally what everybody's been waiting for, my tier list for PvP currently for turn 1. I'll try to go through this quickly, but without further ado, you have to start with Zenith. I know people will complain about BHelena 1SP or Schera or Justia dealing buku damage. I think by far the strongest unit in PvP turn 1 is Zenith. Zenith makes a lot of units that weren't supposed to be able to kill tanks with the right resistances, now more than able to kill tanks. Schera can kill tanks, RRH can kill tanks that should previously weren't able to do it. Zenith gives so much value for 0 SP. The nice thing is you only need her +3 and full potentials. You don't need that 4th or 5th dupe. She works just fine at +3. So definitely a strong unit in just about every PvP comp no matter what. Next up is definitely Helena. Helena at 1 SP gives you an incredible buff. If you're not a fixed damage unit, she is probably the best buffer for you. So 50% crit rate and that 115% magic damage. Again, just absolutely blew Schera's damage out of the water. And she has, in my opinion, she's the best buffer because she has a really strong turn 3. As I mentioned before, Lathel, Rou, they lack some of the value in turn 3, whereas she still has a really strong second costume with that global damage reduction. Then for third one, definitely Pool Party Schera. Pool Party Schera is one of the two SP Dispel costumes. Unfortunately, you couldn't have gotten it if you didn't get it in the summer last year, which I think was August. You couldn't have had it until now. I think they're gonna be rerunning it again in a couple weeks from now. So definitely pick this up if you're looking to run a magic face focused composition. It was really funny because Pool Party Schera, when it came out, everybody said she does like no damage. She's just a 5-chain stacker. Once you needed 2 SP Dispel, she was the one to do it. I also have to put base Schera up here. Base Schera has one of the best AoEs in the game. A 3 straight line channel will oftentimes hit multiple units. Great damage, and of course the Dispel. So it only costs 1 more SP than the Pool Party, so you have less flexibility with other costumes, but aside from that, it's absolute great turn 1 costume. AD Diana came in here. When she first came out in December or January, people were like, is she going to be useful for PvP? And once BHelena got those upgrades on her potentials, like, whoa, you get these crazy shields every other turn. And so that 50k, 40 something K shield is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. And so obviously her turn 3 is kind of weak, and that's the weakness of those turtle comps that run BHelena and AD Diana. But aside from that, she's absolutely great. She'll make your turn 2 very safe. So next we have base Helena. This one's fallen off a little bit. It used to be pretty popular a couple months ago. Maybe there are better alternatives now, but I think it's still really strong. Global damage reduction fulfills a similar role that Rou does. So the problem, running into the same problem of it's dispellable. So, but aside from that, I think it's a great costume for turn 1. Red Riding Hood Rou, if you don't have a super physical or magic focused team, you have a bunch of random carries running around like Sword Queen Sylvia and Ru's and whatever. I think Red Riding Hood Rou is a great stand-in for a buffer. The common criticism is her edge guard's not as high as AD Diana's, but you have to remember it lasts 6 turns. It does have the weakness of being dispellable and taking 2 SP, but it does give you a nice damage buff. And so I think if you're running fully crit units, you wouldn't want to run this with a Justia, wouldn't want to run this with an Alec, but if you want to go full crit, I think this is totally fine. Bloodglut Justia has been one of the queens of PvP attack for quite a while now. The ability to do something like 27 to 28 to low 29k fixed damage with the Lathel has been absolutely, it is incredibly strong, incredibly reliable. Your ability to kill 2 or 3 units, even before Zenith came out, or even before Zenith got her potentials, when RRH would fail to kill an enemy on turn 1, sometimes Bloodglut and Justia could come in and kill in 2, 3, or 4 and secure the round for you anyway. And so I think she's very strong. Her biggest weakness is 30k plus HP tanks, especially Void Gran, but Leclis as well becomes a problem on turn 3. So she does have weaknesses, but otherwise very strong. And then this is basically the safer version. You have a worse AoE, so you're not going to kill multiple units as often, but this is much more safe. You're not going to die to Void Gran, so this is basically the less risky version of BGJ, but in both cases 2 SP for almost a guaranteed 1 kill. I definitely put RRH here, and I don't care about order here. The fact that she's lower than Schera is not important to me, but this is also if you're running a physical comp or you're running a crit based comp like with Red Riding Hood Rou, this is a great 2 SP dispeller. And she has elemental advantage over Gran, which Schera does not, and so she does particularly well with Idol Grans even when they're running 90 defense. H Lathel is the best buffer for physical fixed damage comps. And then Alec hasn't seen nearly as much popularity as Justia, and part of it is probably because there were a lot of banners for Justia, so people had a lot of dupes, and then they were excited for her potentials. And Alec has kind of he has different strengths and weaknesses. He has some problems where like he can, with his turn 1 costume, kill himself on a Void Gran. I think I gave an example earlier, but on turn 3, he's definitely a step up over Eleanor because he will one-shot Leclisses with no problem, whereas Eleanor will very often kill herself. So again, it's a difference in AoE. Eleanor is more likely to kill 2 or 3 units, but she's more likely to kill herself on Leclisse. So, and Leclisse is one of the most popular costumes, as we saw earlier, on defense. So Alec, I think, is comparable to Justia and probably even a little bit better, although less popular. And then Rukik continues to be a 1 SP wonder. The ability to have that incredible evasion just gives incredible tanky, like fake tankiness for your offense. It does mean the outcome of the round is a little bit up to Lady Luck, but that's up to you. If you like that kind of style, go ahead. It's also obviously a 3-space kick, so it can punish box formations. And then in the A tier, these are costumes that do see some play. In my opinion, the best teams don't run these, but they can do well as supportive costumes, and if you have no better alternatives. So Bunny Eclipse, again, she dominated the meta in January and February. At +5, she was absolutely demolishing everything. People were rushing to get 110 MR, but we didn't have it quite yet. And then Idol Gran came out, and the world kind of changed because she couldn't deal with 110 MR Idol Gran, so she fell out of favor. She still does catch a lot of teams off guard, but if you run into a 110 MR Gran, you're going to have a hard time with her. So that's why I wouldn't put her in S tier. And Rubia, I've seen some. This is kind of if you want to run like kind of a neutral or mid-range type of attack comp. And Rubia has some offensive ability, but mostly you use her for that really, really strong guaranteed evasion for 3 attacks. And so she's basically a 2 SP wall, similar to Rue. I think she has a lot of potential. She does really well, even when the enemy has high defense units, because a lot of them are wind. So you're going to run into the Zeniths, you're going to run into the Leclisses, and I think Rubia can do really well against them, even though she's physical damage, but I don't think she's the best. Schera's Code S. Schera's Code S, you would think, is one of the strongest because it has the additional ability of the silence, right? It not only dispels, it silences, so it's really good on turn 1 because if it doesn't kill, which it won't always kill, it does prevent them from attacking. The AoE is just a little bit worse than her base, in my opinion, so that's why I would rate her an A instead of S. Manager Gray used to be one of the strongest costumes as a follow-up to Justia long before Idol Gran and Bunny Eclipse and all those costumes came out. He's fallen a little bit out of favor now, and with his multi-hit, he is very likely to kill himself on a Void Gran, very likely to kill himself on a Leclisse, but aside from that, he still is a decent stand-in if you have no alternatives for turn 1. So next, Sword Queen Sylvia continues to be a 1 SP wonder. She does need to charge up a little bit with her Sword Queen Sylvia on turn 1, and then her turn 3 and turn 5 get benefit from that bonus attack. One of the biggest problems with Sword Queen Sylvia, of course, is that she will kill herself on Void Gran with her multi-hit, and she doesn't have enough damage with a single hit to one-shot her like a Justia or Alex does, so she's very likely to kill herself against Void Gran. That continues to be probably her biggest problem. Same thing can be said with Maya Base Gray, and same thing could be said with Roxy as well. These are all units that have great value turn 1. Like Gray, with his enhanced range, he has like a full plus sign. He can do incredible damage against a lot of units, and he has a great burn. The biggest problem is that he kills himself on Void Gran. And the same thing with Roxy. So Roxy has, that 3-space skip silence, which allows you to throw, like, I've seen some people do Samay openers where they run with Samay as their buffer. They have mediocre damage and they won't kill the tankiest of units, but they're left over with 1 SP to throw a Roxy silence down a column, which is very likely to completely incapacitate a team at the sacrifice of some raw damage on the front end. But I think this has, again, a lot of potential. As I mentioned before in my Roxy guide, I think she does great in A. I don't think she's quite S tier, but I think she's solid. And the really nice thing is for new players, if you don't have a lot of PvP units, I think she'll have a spot in your team for a while. And again, she has great follow-up with her nuke on turn 3. The biggest problem being if an Eclipse hits, you won't have enough SP for it. But if you do have enough SP for it, you're going to clean house. So Now in the B tier, these are costumes I would not prioritize, but I think have a lot of potential, and players might find new creative ways to use them that might change my mind in the future. So Justia here, as I mentioned before, Justia can do a ton of damage. Biggest problem is that this is the costume that does kill you even more likely to kill you against Idol Void Gran if you run into her, because it's a multi-hit, so it's fixed damage, but she won't deal enough to kill in the first hit. So it does have a nicer AoE. A lot of players will use diagonal positioning because they're afraid of the stabs and the line abilities, but I just don't think it has enough consistency. Same thing with Therese. Therese's push can cause a lot of havoc on a team, but with an Idol Gran forcing you to kick like the back row and hit nothing else, it just doesn't do well enough against an Idol Gran. But if you dispel before you use this ability, it does have the potential to compromise the enemy's position, unless they're doing like a 401 or a 104, in which case it's not going to do too much. But if they're kind of spreading their units out with an anti-eclipse strategy or something, this can do decent havoc. Base Samei, I'm kind of mixed on it. Base Samei is super efficient with a baby buffer for 0 SP. 15% more damage is nothing to sneeze at for both magic and physical. But I don't think it quite gets you to damage thresholds as much as you would like, and you kind of have to go with the other buffers more often. But this is highly dependent on the exact gear the enemy has. In some cases, she can be a star and win fights that other buffers wouldn't have allowed you to do because you have one more SP to throw in, like a Roxy Silence or a Rue Kick. Yuri, both her base and not her base, but the White Bolt and the Idol costume, I don't see a ton. I think, again, she has a lot of potential. The fact that she can full cycle is something to be said, because Eleanor, Therese, like Eclipse, these very meta units, or at least Eleanor and Eclipse are, they can't full cycle, whereas Yuri can, right? She can just cycle between two great abilities. It is a single hit, so if you're able to kill a Gran, it is nicer that you have the single hit. The only thing is you probably would rather open with the Dispel first, but I haven't tested this enough. I think her biggest problem is running into those 90 def, huge tanks. It's going to be kind of 50-50 whether you hit them with the Dispel or you hit them with the nuke. So we'll see. I haven't seen a ton of play of her, and not a ton of success from other players, but maybe she pokes up because she does have that Dispel with the multi-hit. So Angelica, base Angelica, I used to run her. I don't anymore. She is a little bit luck based, but she has a really nice AoE. People are not expecting that diagonally left, huge nuke. The biggest problem is when she runs into big 90 mres tanks, she's not going to do too much to them, even with a ton of crit, and she doesn't benefit from something like BHelena's magic attack buff. So she is a unit that runs great with a unit like Red Riding Hood Rue, but does run into problems with Idol Gran when she's like 85 for defense and mres. She doesn't quite have enough damage to deal with her. Seer, Leclis, and Glacia, all these tanks, I think they have a lot of potential. Occasionally you run into these when you're defending, and they usually catch you off guard and you can't do anything about them. Again, my biggest concern is that these have some counter potential with Dispel. So if these become really popular in meta, people are just going to run 2 Dispellers in a row on defense, and they might have found a solution. But again, these aren't super popular right now, so we'll have to see in the future how things go. I already talked about Yuri, not too much to say here. Again, she has a nice rotation with the full rotation. Maid Leah, I put her here, not even because I think she's super great, but because a lot of players are going to have her +5. I just want to make sure they're in your mind, or she's in your mind. If you're a new-ish player that have been playing for 2-3 months, you don't, when you see a player post their dupes and they have absolutely nothing but like 1 or 2 recent banner costumes, there's not a lot to work with. So if you have nothing else, I think she can do okay here. She does have, since she's fire, she does have elemental advantage over a lot of tanks, with the exception of Glacia and Therese. So I think there's potential, but I definitely wouldn't prioritize her if you have better options from SRA. And then these other costumes, I'm not even super committed to these. Like Angelica used to be okay, not so great anymore. She's quite expensive. Elisa's 3 SP, which is quite a bit. She does have that shred, so she can kill, but she kind of gets countered by Idol Gran. She's not going to deal enough to kill an Idol Gran. Eclipse used to have her time, not that great for attack anymore. Same thing with these. None of these units do particularly well against Idol Gran. And again, as a newer player, if you're looking at this guide, you're going to run into Idol Gran a lot. And that's why these Dispel units, these nuke costumes, these Zeniths are there to help you deal with Idol and Void Gran. And beyond that, I'd put everybody else. I don't think there are any other costumes that are noteworthy, but again, things may change in the future. So I'm sure just by putting this list together, plenty of people are going to disagree with me, and that's okay. This is not a super data focused tier list. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the way they count the costume popularity in game for the display, but hopefully this gives you a sense of what costumes you can aim for, what costumes you can pull for. If you see reruns of banners, especially like Pool Party Schera is probably going to be rerun in the summer, I would definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, that's what I think the current state of the meta is. Alright, so if you made it this far, I am impressed. I know it's been a long video. I had a lot of thoughts to get down on paper and in this video, so thanks for sticking around. But just want to have some summary thoughts because I know there's a lot of content just to take with you as you go. First thing, attack in PvP is heavily SP gated, so don't be surprised if you don't have a lot of options. That's just reality. You have to accumulate certain SP thresholds to be able to have a strong attack. I'd say decide on a goal comp early if you want to go like a physical aggro or a magical defensive turtle one, or you want to do some kind of mixed utility and crit comp with Red Riding Hood Rou or something like that. Decide on that early and definitely use Kane's gear calculator. I'll link it in the description. You need to be putting together, like, you need to know what substats you need, what what gives you the most damage and stuff like that. And then once you have that goal in mind, you got to work on dupes and gear and pot thresholds. These are all things that just take time, right? Unless you want to spend money. And all of that is mostly to deal with Idol Gran. You need some way to deal with Idol Gran if you're going to try to kill her. Alternatively, if you don't want to try to kill her, just throw a Dispel at her and use other costumes to try to kill other enemies, and just accept that you're not going to be able to deal with Idol Gran too well. And then of course with positioning, you got to position primarily around Bunny Eclipse and Blood Glut and Justia, and maybe, if again as I mentioned, if you're vulnerable to Dispel, around Schera. And then lastly, always, if you have new comp ideas, some people have shared some cool comp ideas, and I'm like, wow, that might work. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's the fun of the game. And of course, most importantly, have fun. This is a game to have for fun. If you're not having fun, just don't play the game. So yeah, that's everything I think I've wanted to say on PvP to this point. I'm just going to follow new characters. The meta doesn't change too quickly now, but especially with all the potentials released, but I'll keep an eye on it, and I have some ideas for content in the future, but I think this is most of what I wanted to cover today. So yep, good luck in Mirror Wars.